Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bella Gamer, and today we're going to be covering my favorite archetype from Divine Mysteries, which is going to be the Palatine Detective. This is going to be an interesting one, and honestly, for I think many of the videos, or at least a couple, we're going to be looking into a bit of a religion in this one, as the Palatine Detective is unsurprisingly from and associated with the Order of the Palatine Eye. But before we get into all that stuff, what you need to know is the Palatine Detective is a class archetype for the investigator, and one that I really like. It's one that I originally kind of thought it was more similar to kind of like a monster hunter, like from Supernatural. But the more I've looked into it, the more the Palatine Detective kind of comes off as the Doctor. Now, if you're not a Whovian like I am, then I'll try to make it make sense. But the Doctor is a character who uses essentially otherworldly knowledge to get through any situation, even fight wars without having to use a weapon himself. And the Palatine Detective has this kind of toolkit kind of based on that. It's a character that uses its recall knowledge to great effect to give it extra emphasis against its enemies and to defend itself from pretty much any threat. You also get a toolkit of spells that kind of work how the sonic screwdriver does in Doctor Who.
9.
You'll find.
8.
Where it can always just do the thing you need it to do in a situation. It's very fun, it's very interesting, and honestly, it's a kind of character I've been really searching for myself. I love occult researchers. I love characters who are just normal people who manage to tap into just enough of the occult forces to utilize their own natural-born skill and intelligence along with these these supernatural powers to kind of save the day. I really like it. It reminds me very of like Constantine or the Dresden Files or like Supernatural. So if that all sounds interesting to you, then I cannot wait to share the Palatine Detective with you. But let's talk about the fact that Paizo sent me a copy of Divine Mysteries for the sake of review. Now, this is not paid content. They're not paying me to make this video. All they've done is provide the book, so all thoughts and opinions here are my own. But this channel is partnered with Into the AM, as you see this nice shirt I've been wearing here, and I've been wearing their shirts a lot. You probably see me talk about them in some of my other videos. Right now, they got a killer deal for the next month or so until December 8th. You can get up to 60% off on purchases you find on that website, plus I have a 10% discount code located down in the description below. So whatever that discount is, you get an additional 10% on top of that, meaning you can get some really nice shirts for real cheap. Some of my viewers have already gotten some shirts, and I wanted to let you guys know because the holidays are right around the corner, and I do love their shirts. I think they're really good. I think they're really high quality, and I own 6 of them now. So you know I definitely like them. Anyway, now that the shilling is done, let's go ahead and talk about the Esoteric Order of the Palatine Eye. So the Order, I'm just going to call it that from now on, is a pantheon, quote unquote, that you can be a part of that makes you kind of a part of a scholar's secret organization is the best way to put it. It has a lot of the rumblings of like the Age of Discovery, where people have gone into like the Egyptian deserts and come back with like fascinating things, right? And while there are some socio-political things around that, the idea about this one is a lot more sound, honestly, and it makes a lot more sense. So the original member Aldous went out into like the Osirian desert and was lost for 3 years. Then he came back knowing just secrets of the universe, and he went back to all his like scholarly friends in Ustalav, and they formed this order. And it's a very secretive order. The character Yavali, who is this little psychopomp who's kind of the narrator for a lot of Divine Mysteries, is a very powerful entity. It can get almost anywhere, but the Order is a place it cannot penetrate. And so it has to make a lot of different conjectures based on what the Order does. It's that secretive. And even divine messengers, Yavali being a divine messenger of Pharasma, cannot penetrate the inner sanctum of the Esoteric Order. So it's very interesting. And they've recently, in recent times, have managed to tap into some extra knowledge, which allows their members to essentially use divine magic. And this is already on top of the fact that many members of the Order have access to occult magic through the various secrets they've found of the cosmos. Now, the Order was originally made by Aldous, as I mentioned before, and he got this information from a desiccated angel he found called Tabris. And so there's now the lost Gospels of Tabris that the newer Order members found. And so somewhere in the universe, there is a desiccated angel, or there was, that's been giving mortals like knowledge beyond knowledge of the cosmos. And the members are so intelligent and they have access to so many like artifacts and such that they've managed to crack the code of reality, getting divine power from not a god, but maybe an artifact, and being able to actually recreate occult things. So all this already is insane. I actually really, really like the Esoteric Order. I think it's really fun. I think it's really cool. And it gives me so many different ideas for characters. But now let's talk about the Palatine Detective. So the Palatine Detective is an investigator class archetype, which I mentioned before. But if you're unfamiliar with the concept of class archetypes, so you essentially select this at character creation. When you start at level 1, you select this as an investigator, and it kind of locks you in to this class archetype. So you must select the class archetype dedication feat at level 2, and you actually do need to select 2 other feats before you can multi-class or archetype into anything else. And in addition to this, this comes with a new methodology. This new methodology, the Esoterica methodology, is only selectable if you're a Palatine Detective, and is the only methodology you can select as a Palatine Detective. So what you get is you're trained in either religion or occultism, and you gain the quick identification feat. In addition to this, you gain 2 cantrips. You gain a occult cantrip and a divine cantrip. This is really cool because you get to have 2 different cantrips from 2 very different traditions. And that's really interesting. That's already a very cool feature. Now, this doesn't make you a spellcaster. None of actually what the Palatine Detective does gives you spell slots, but instead innate spells like these 2 cantrips. So I really like this. This gives you at level 1 a very cool feature because you're already a investigator, which is a pretty cool class by my opinion. And now you get a little bit of sprinkling of interesting cantrips that break the normal traditions that most characters have to abide by. You know, I don't think there's many or any other classes that can get 2 different traditions of cantrips at level 1. I think that's really, really interesting, and it makes the Palatine Detective really cool. Now, this is kind of a major feature of this particular class archetype because you get these innate spells, most of which you can only cast once per day. So you pick up spells that rather are meant for combat use and are instead more for utility use. Maybe they come up in a very specific situation. Now, as I mentioned before, this reminds me a lot of Doctor Who, how his sonic screwdriver can just kind of do whatever he needs it to do in a certain situation. And I really enjoy this. I think this is such a fascinating idea. Though I will state there is a little bit of weird wording here. It says you become trained in the spell attack and DC statistics. And that's because technically you're not trained in a tradition. And with 2nd edition, there's a lot of weird ruling when it comes to spellcasting. So pretty much now in in the remaster of 2nd edition, if you know spellcasting at all, you can use all spellcasting as effectively, though you might not have access to said other spells. And the Palatine Detective doesn't give you spell slots or even technically a spell list. You just get a bunch of innate spells that just work off of your basic statistics. So you're not trained in DCs and attack rolls for religion or occultism just for the spells you get from this. If you pick up spell slots by any other method, somehow you're not going to be able to say, if you become a primal sorcerer multiclass archetype, you can't pick up divine or occult spells through that. That's normally not how it works anyway, but what I'm saying is it's just really weird and it comes off as strange. All you need to know is that you start off trained, and so your DCs are considered trained for the use of the innate spells you pick up through this dedication. So hopefully I explained that well enough, but let's go ahead and get into the dedication itself. So at level 2, and I guess now is a really good time to point this out, the Palatine Detective is a uncommon class archetype. So you do need, well, one, you do have to be affiliated with the Esoteric Order anyway. So you need to have some story reason. That's not necessarily a big deal, but you do need to loosely follow the anathema and the edicts of the order, because that's kind of like a big part of their thing, which means a lot of your character is going to be shrouded in mystery. You can't give up those, you can't give up the secrets of your order, because then you break essentially the connection you have, and you won't be able to use, like, it doesn't mention that here, but that's really how it works, especially when it comes to the use of divine abilities. So it's really, really cool. Very, very interesting. And I'll go ahead and real quick and throw up the order just so you can pause real quick, look at the edicts and anathema. But just know you're kind of beholden to this. And the dedication is very cool. So at level 2, when you pick up the dedication, you get a +1 status bonus to any kind of mental effects that may come to your character. So you're just better at defending your mental capabilities. Pretty good. It's a very common feature. Like, I know many ancestries get something similar, so that's actually not that interesting. What is interesting is the unique reaction you get, which is called the Mystic Aegis. So Mystic Aegis is an interesting reaction because it requires that you have successfully recalled knowledge on an opponent, and as they're striking at you, you can use this reaction to gain resistance to all damage equal to 2 plus half your level. Now, this is all done through some kind of mystic pendant you have, whether it is a golden scarab or some other implement. And what I like about it is the narrative part where you use some of that cosmic knowledge you know to create this charm. It's not like a specific divine symbol that's supposed to protect you. Your character invented this charm for the sake of defending yourself. And even more cool, as you essentially get shield block. Now, you do need to have a hand free to use this, which does, unfortunately, really stick the investigator into the one-handed weapon category if you do want to make use of this frequently enough. But if you're ranged, that might not be as big of an issue. Though, I definitely got to say, it's really cool. I like it, and you essentially get to shield block with a free hand, which can be really cool. It's very, very interesting, and I really do like this. And I want to make special mention of another feat, which is known weakness. So known weakness is not new to Investigator. In fact, this is pretty core. And it lets you, as a part of devising a stratagem, recall knowledge on the opponent. And if you crit succeed, you actually get bonuses against the opponent. Now, a lot of what the Palatine Detective does is give you bonuses for recalling knowledge on opponents. And devise a stratagem is really good, especially with the new changes to Investigator in the remaster, where we now have both the attack stratagem and the skill stratagem. So you're going to want to use devise a stratagem a lot, and the ability to recall knowledge at the same time is some pretty good action compression, but especially becomes very, very useful in the Palatine Detective. So if you're going to select this class archetype, I really recommend picking up known weakness, as you're going to get a lot of mileage out of it. Now, before we get into the rest of the feats, I do want to mention the additional feats added to this particular class archetype, which are both available at level 6, and that's going to be the feats Cast Out from the Exorcist dedication. It just allows you to exorcise a person or object to remove a spirit from it. It's very standard, like ghost hunter stuff. And also Thaumaturgic Ritualist, which is from the Thaumaturge. And what it does is it makes you better at using rituals. And also you get to learn uncommon rituals up to half your level, and you get more every 4 levels. So every 4 levels, you get another ritual that is half your level or lower. And the fun part about this really blends in super well with the Esoteric Order, because you are the only person that can cast these rituals as the primary caster, and you can't teach these to anyone else. That's just found in the feat, but it blends so perfectly in with the Palatine Detective. I really like the theming around it. And I mean, if your allies know the ritual, then of course they can be the primary casters. But the thing is that these rituals you learn through this one feat pickup at level 6, which is honestly pretty good. And it's every 4 levels from level 4, because that's normally when Thaumaturge would pick it up. So it's 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. Anyway, figured I'd make mention of that. It's really cool, and I love rituals. I think it's something very fascinating and really good for an occultist kind of character. That's really what the Palatine Detective is becoming. So the Palatine Detective is an occultist. They know secrets of the world, and they have access to divine magic in a way where most characters don't. It's so cool. So as we get on with the rest of the feats here, they're really going to compound on this feature, but just know that we get a few extra additional feats along with these new ones for the Palatine Detective. So the first feat that becomes available after the dedication, or at least one of them, because there's 2 level 4 ones, is Esoteric spellcasting. You pick either occult spells or divine spells, and you gain an innate spell that you can use once per day of 1st rank. Now, at every even level, up to level 8, you get a new spell at the next higher rank. So at 6th level, you gain a 2nd rank spell, and at 8th level, you gain a 3rd rank spell. And you can take this feat twice. One to select occult and another to select divine spells. So you can actually pick up, by selecting this feat twice, up to 6 spells of 1st to 3rd rank, which is pretty good. Now, again, this doesn't really have any scaling. So you want to select spells that you can use in ways that are more utility based. I mean, Bless is a really good, pretty much all-rounder good spell if you're more combat focused, but there are some other really good ones as well. Just make sure you're aware these aren't going to heighten, and we're not going to be a real spellcaster. Sure, at this level, we're trained just like any other spellcasters, but we're only ever going to get to expert, and we're only going to get to expert spellcasting at 10th level, which is pretty late compared to the other spellcasters, and we never get to master. So I wouldn't pick up anything that's particularly save based or particularly attack roll based. I'll pick up mostly utility spells, though even the save based ones typically do something when an enemy succeeds. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but just, my words of advice. The other level 4 feat is very interesting, and this is what made me think of the Doctor from Doctor Who. It's Text Decoder. So Text Decoder allows you to decode any writing, no matter the language, using either occultism or religion. You can use occultism or religion for any deciphering check, and you're not barred from any language-based barriers. So if you succeed, actually, let's take a look at the decipher writing skill real quick, just so you can see what I'm talking about. So when you succeed, normally you get the gist of what it's saying. Even if it's in a code, you might not know the specifics, but you generally understand what it's trying to say and can glean what the message or information is about. That's actually really, really cool. And it reminds me of Doctor Who just seems to, after he analyzes a situation enough, be able to just roll off some weird esoteric kind of space thing that is related to, he always seems to know what you're dealing with once he's kind of worked it out. And this is kind of very reminiscent of that. And if you crit succeed, you pretty much can read the text, even if you don't understand the language, which is really, really cool. It creates a lot of situations where your character kind of looks it up and he's just like, yeah, I don't really speak Null, but this has the reminiscence of this one particular cipher I know. And so if I kind of do this, that, or whatever, and yeah, I don't know what the ritual is necessarily purely about, but it's a ritual about sacrificing people, that kind of thing. It's a really fun idea. And while Text Decoder is very situational. I don't know how often you would come up to, like in my games, it's rare. It will come up maybe once or twice regularly in an adventure, but that's over the course of an entire adventure. So is that worth a level 4 feat? I don't know, maybe. I wouldn't necessarily pick it over the spellcasting. I think that's generally overall better and more useful. But Text Decoder, I think, is really cool, and it makes your character just way smarter just by having it be available. So yeah, I really liked it, and this is what made me really think of Doctor Who when it came to the Palatine Detective. Now at level 6, when we got those other additional feats available to us, we have the Palatine Enchantment. This one's really cool because if a creature could be, if a recall knowledge could be used on a creature that uses either occultism or religion, which are typically, aberrations, fiends, angels, and monstrosities, then you can actually enchant yourself. When you have to use devise a stratagem, I should mention. So whenever you devise a stratagem on a creature that you could use occultism or religion to recall knowledge on that, which, by the way, known weakness would allow you to do so at the same time, then the subsequent strike you make can be treated as if you have Vitalize or Ghost Touch. This makes your weapon very good against undead enemies or any enemies that are, weak to vitality. And it allows you to attack ghosts with no problem. And ghosts are very typically immune to precision damage, but at the very least, your weapon can still do damage to the ghost. I really wish this would actually allow us to treat our precision damage to bypass the immunities of creatures that don't normally have organs, at least ones that, we could roll occultism or religion for. But at the very least, getting Ghost Touch is really good. And many creatures that require you to use Ghost Touch to really hit them are also weak to Ghost Touch weapons. So it's pretty good. I really like this one as a general level 6 feat. And so if you're not going with the Ritualist route, which is one that I'd be very tempted to take personally, I think the Palatine Enchantment is a really good level 6 feat. Now, I need to make mention that now from this point forward, you don't need to select any more of the Palatine Detective feats to multi-class archetype or archetype out of it. So, remember, class archetypes allow you to kind of slightly change the way you play a class. And so you don't need to further invest if you don't want to. Granted, Palatine Detective has some really cool feats. So let's talk about Palatine Strike. So Palatine Strike is very interesting because if you have successfully recalled knowledge on a creature that requires either occultism or religion, when you make a devised strike, you get to do an additional 2d6 precision damage. Now, this is really cool, except for the fact that many aberrations and ghosts and such are just immune to precision damage. So, this was a really good opportunity to make this feat allow you to bypass that kind of immunity a lot of creatures tend to have. And I mean, you have to select a whole class archetype, so I don't even think it's necessarily that broken. And it's not like the Investigator is a powerhouse on the battlefield. So, honestly, in my games, I'll probably homebrew this one to allow it to bypass the precision damage immunities of creatures. I mean, it has to be a strategic strike anyway. But still, I find it funny. And the cool thing is, though, is it's still 2d6 extra damage. You just get a flat damage bonus off of things that you were already doing. This is just straight up a damage increase, essentially, for your Investigator, which makes it pretty cool. Challenge Insight is also very interesting. So Challenge Insight is really, really fun. You have such a deep understanding of the mysteries of the universe that you can challenge a creature's knowledge of their own mystic abilities to cause doubt, causing them to potentially mess up a spell they're using and to become stupefied one if you're successful. So as a reaction, when a creature is casting a spell that is either of the divine or occult traditions, and the caster must be able to hear and understand you, so it can't be used against a creature that just doesn't speak common or any languages you might know, which, again, you're an Investigator. There's a good chance you know a ton of languages, so this might not even be necessarily a problem for you. You attempt to counteract this spell. So if it's an occult spell, you can use your occultism, and if it's a divine spell, you use your religion, which really means that the Palatine Detective is really going to want to boost both their occultism and their religion, which is pretty easy to do considering you're an investigator and you get skill increases every level. But still, I would definitely recommend doing your occultism and your religion. But anyway, so for challenge insight, this is really good because it's a counter spell. It gives investigator a counter spell that, sure, you can only use once per day, but if you succeed in the counteract, the spell is instantly disrupted and the creature becomes stupefied 1 until the end of their next turn. So if they try to cast another spell again, they're going to have a problem and their spell is just going to be less effective. This is great. Again, it's something that makes your character look insanely smart. Knowing how to cast spells better than like a fiend or an angel might. It's something that I really like. And the fact that when you succeed, which by the way, you're very likely, because if at this point, you're going to be probably master proficiency in both, you're going to make that check very likely more often than not. And the whatever it is going to be sitting in there questioning life as it can't use its divine abilities or occult abilities anymore. I really like this. It makes the Palatine Detective really fun. It's a very fun, creative style of class, and I absolutely like it. If I wasn't so dedicated to playing a witch next, I would have to play an investigator. This is just really good. Next up at level 10, we got Cursebreaker. Now this one is another counteract, but for curses specifically. Granted, we can only use this one once per day. And what's really interesting about this one is normally I would probably have a problem with it being once per day. It's just like, I should know enough about curses and everything that I could break it on multiple people. But if you fail the check or if multiple people have it, it creates interesting moments in games that I feel like being limited creates more interesting, situations. Because it's like, oh, I didn't pack enough wolfsbane to cure all these people of their werewolf curse or something like that. It's very interesting. And so it can create kind of mini quests during a grander adventure, which I like. I think that's really cool. So like sometimes having something be limited gives it extra effect. And again, we're just an investigator that gets access to essentially a spell, though this is more of a spell-like effect because there are spells that can break curses. This one is just once per day. We get to break a curse rather. And what's even more interesting about that is if the curse comes from like an object specifically, you can't disenchant the object. You can't break an object's curse. You can only separate a person or a target creature from the curse. And it makes it where it's very interesting. And it brought up an interesting question where, like, if an object is cursed, I guess the spells that break curses could remove that. But the Palatine Detective can't. Meaning you kind of have this interesting situation where the Palatine Detective can kind of preserve cursed objects that other characters might not be able to, which means you could use them in interesting ways. I don't know. This one has a lot of flavor. Is it super practical? Probably not. And there's another level 10 feat that we're going to talk about here in a bit that I think is just way better. But I do like this one. And that's the thing about the Palatine Detective. Again, it's so flavorful and it has so many interesting narrative elements that if you play in games that are more narratively driven, like the games I like to play and or run, then this is a really fun archetype dedication. And it even has some good mechanical benefits in combat as well, granted for niche groups of enemies. For a lot of enemies, honestly, the only things you can't really be super effective against are most humanoids and like animals or magical beasts, typically. But even some magical beasts can have occultism rolled on them. So yeah, I don't know. It's really, really interesting. And now we got a couple more feats, but before we get to that, I want to mention, if you're enjoying the video, leave a like. I really do like reviewing a lot of this material. And I think I've found sorry, I bumped the mic there, of a type of content that I really like, a presentation style that I think is doing better. So if you want to see my videos as they improve and get better on all things TTRPG, leave a like. And as well, more videos for Divine Mysteries are going to be coming out in the days to come. And I recommend if you watch any of those videos to leave a like on those as well. We need to show the algorithm that people care about Pathfinder 2nd Edition or TTRPGs in general. And the only way we're going to do that is by interacting with it, by leaving likes or leaving comments. So whatever you guys can do to help TTRPGs, that's my only goal, really. So it doesn't even have to be my video. As long as you're liking other people's videos, as many as you can, all the better, in my opinion. But if you do like my content specifically, then subscribe. I tend to get the books about a week early, so if you want to see anything released from Paizo, I definitely recommend it. And as well, companies are starting to send me their books and materials now, so I get to do a lot of very cool reviews. So if you are interested in TTRPGs at all, I definitely recommend to subscribe. All right, on to the last couple feats. So first of all, we have a little bit of an error. So this is greater esoteric spellcasting, but you can see here that the feat is written at 12th level, but it's actually a 10th level feat. It actually refers to it here in the feat, and it doesn't make sense otherwise. So you do need to be careful, but this is technically a 10th level feat. It's even found that the next feat is also a 10th level feat, so normally they go by order of level. So this just tells me it's an error, but maybe I'm wrong, who knows? But it doesn't make sense for the feat otherwise, so I'm pretty sure this is a 10th level feat. Anyway, more spell casting. This gives you a 4th, 5th, and 6th rank spell eventually. So when you pick this feat up, which would be at 10th level probably, then you get a 4th rank spell. And then at 12th, you get a 5th rank spell, and finally at 14th, you get a 6th rank spell. This is the highest we get in spellcasting. And you do need esoteric spellcasting to select this feat, and they do need to be of the same tradition of the spells you selected before. Granted, if you took it twice, then it could be either, and you can select this feat twice to get the other tradition as well. So, pretty good. This also makes you an expert in spellcasting, and that's pretty good, because if this feat is indeed at level 10, we're going to have the same spellcasting efficiency as essentially a wizard, witch, or other intelligence-based spellcaster until at least level 15. So, honestly, you get some pretty good spellcasting. Now, granted, these are all innate spells that can be used only once per day. We don't get any slots or anything like that. But even selecting this again at level 12 could be really good, because then you gain one, when you select it at level 12, you would gain an additional 2 feats on top of the 2 spells on top of the spell that you would get at level 12, meaning that if you selected both the spellcasting feats twice, we can get a total number of spells of 12, split between occult and divine spells. Pretty good, and honestly, very similar to many spellcasting multi-class archetypes. So I really like this. I think it's really good. It gives you a massive number of tools, and when you start getting 4th rank spells and above, we start learning some very cool spells. I mean, like flight. Granted, I don't think flight is available for either of these traditions. Even if it is, there are other really, really cool spells like heroism that are also really good. And yeah, so this is something that I find to be really cool about this overall class archetype. It just gives you a ton of tools to do some very interesting things without overplaying its hand. You're not preparing spell slots. You're not trying to get spells ready for the day ahead. You just have some tools that you selected up until this point, and it can be something that's a part of your journey. So I really like this feat. And we have one final feat here before I want to give kind of my synopsis on the Palatine Detective. This one is called Open the Blazing Eye. And you can see here, this is also a 10th level feat, and it's 2 actions. Now, again, unsurprisingly, this is another once per day ability, but essentially for 2 actions, you give yourself true sight for the next minute. And if the creature in question that you are perceiving or whatever in a fight, you can use either occultism or religion to roll a recall knowledge on this creature. Your attacks against that creature ignore any circumstance penalties to the attacks and automatically succeed any flat checks based on concealment for those creatures. So it's pretty good, but honestly, just the ability to have true sight is really good. Even though it's only for a minute, I honestly wish this was more like 10 minutes. That would give it some more out of combat ability. But regardless, this is a really cool feature, and being able to prevent yourself from suffering from circumstance penalties for attacking creatures applies in a lot of situations, like being prone. Your attack against that creature, if you're prone, will have 0 penalties, which means you don't have to necessarily stand up in the middle of a combat, even though your AC is going to be reduced. Hey, at least we have Mystic Aegis that can be a really good shield block at this level. So that is the Palatine Detective. Now, I love the Palatine Detective. Don't get me wrong, especially when I made the Doctor Who kind of connection. I think this is a really, really fun class archetype. But I gotta say, class archetypes to me have always been a thing that are more specific to changing the playstyle of a class. The Battle Harbinger, also in this book, and another class I'll be making a video, or a class archetype I'll be making a video on at some point in the future, really changes how the cleric plays. And I would say the Palatine Detective, you are really just doing the same investigator things. I love their feats, and I think you get to do some really interesting things and have a much more occultic style of investigator. Really, really cool. But it doesn't really change the style of investigator. So if you're looking for a fresh new take on investigator, probably not the class archetype that's going to really change that. It's going to be fun. And I think if you like investigator, you're going to like the Palatine Detective, especially with all the narrative bits behind it. But I do got to say, it really doesn't change what the investigator is about. Though, I do want to see more feats and more abilities given to investigator in the future that really work off of recall knowledge. They have so many great benefits on recalling knowledge on creatures or using devised strikes and all kinds of stuff like that. And the Palatine Detective really puts that force in, where it's like, if it's a creature that you have recalled knowledge or could recall knowledge on, you get special benefits, which really makes the investigator have knowledge as power, which is really, really cool and a great concept and a really good fantasy for the class. So the Palatine Detective is definitely my favorite investigator moving forward. And it's definitely it's definitely a class I'm going to play. Honestly, I think I'm kind of set now. After I'm done with Witch, I'm probably going to play a Palatine Detective Investigator. It's just too cool, and I would love to play this style of class archetype. But hey, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for listening to me ramble for the last 30 minutes. Hopefully you enjoyed. Anyway, good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.